Last week, I saw this tweet that struck me on so many levels. I am really fascinated by American culture, and like as millennials who many of us weren't able to buy homes, largely just being priced out of the market. Because, like, who has $250,000 in cash for a down payment when you're making like $65,000 a year? I've been thinking about what I've been thinking about what I've been thinking about what it would look like to own a home with another person, right? As is typical of millennials. My best friend and I have talked for years about buying a really big house or buying a duplex together. We haven't done it, of course, but we still bring it up all of the time. I also had this I also had this really weird idea about like a bunch of friends like creating a trust and like buying a house, waiting a few years, rolling over like the appreciation into a down payment on a second home, waiting another few years, doing the same thing again so that you get like after 12-ish years, like you get houses for four people. I understand this is like a terrible, terrible plan, right? Um, like I get it. It's weird. I'm weird. But I've never really let the unreality of a thing prevent me from like trying to come up with new ideas. Necessity, invention, you know. I completely understand that this is an awful plan, but like the market is awful, interest rates are awful, wages are awful, and we need shelter. So, like, what are we going to do? Besides the fact that I just don't have the ability to make like interest rates, my taxes, my savings account, and the market all align perfectly in order to let me buy all align perfectly to allow me to buy anything anyway. I have a very serious concern about how conflicts in this environment would be resolved because, as far as I can tell, Americans don't really do conflict resolution. Millennials, for example, we bail on shit like it is our national sport. Like we bail on friends the moment that we perceive that they're toxic, and we bail on accountability when we're called out ourselves. Um, we bail on jobs because that's the literal we bail on jobs because that's literally the only way to get ahead in this economy. We bail on neighborhoods when crime goes up. Um, we bail on our communities and they start getting browner. We bail on school funding when students are struggling. We bail on accessibility to healthcare because, you know, some folks want to have lower taxes. We bail on churches like the minute we have a disagreement. Interestingly to me, about our parents' cohort, baby boomers, like culturally, they preached and often practiced like the complete opposite approach. They seem to have internalized. They seem to have in. They seem to have internalized this idea that quitting is some immense moral failure, which is maybe less healthy than like bailing on a bad thing. They went the grin and bear it route, right? Um, Boomers thought it was fine to just like tough it out and be absolutely miserable in the process. And we keep wondering why these very miserable people are so incredibly abusive. Boomers are also really inclined to like force themselves into people's proximity instead of respecting other people's lived experiences. Refusing to acknowledge another party's experience is also a form of running away from conflict resolution. It just is. If I simply choose to reject your experience because it doesn't align with my point of view or my self interest, I'm the party with emotional resilience is like, that's false. That is not true. I think that the general orientation of I kind of feel like the general orientation of millennials is like, the ship is going down. I'm gonna hop in this lifeboat. I'm gonna get the fuck out of here. While baby boomers are sitting around yelling, like, only cowards leave the ship. And, Gen Xers are not saying or doing very much. Maybe praying? Okay, bully, noted. Only cowards go down with the ship. Cool. Just to be abundantly clear to baby boomers and anyone else who needs reminding, like, bailing is not inherently a lack of emotional resilience. Just like staying is not inherently proof of emotional resilience. Bailing, oops. In fact, bailing can in itself be a form of emotional resilience when it costs more to leave a space than it does to stay and suffer through it. In the scenarios that I listed, like, there are a million valid reasons to leave any of those spaces, relationships, jobs, whatever the case is. Like, there's many situations where it's very wise to get into the lifeboat. Especially when somebody else who's lacking in emotional resilience can't manage, can't deal with reality if your lived experience is also valid, is also equal. Like, somebody needed to tell baby boomers like 35 years ago, staying in a relationship where you're constantly disrespected will not magically make you or like the other person a better person someday. Suffering because of someone else's lack of emotional resilience or ability to be respectful is not a moral necessity. Ignoring your own experiences and feelings doesn't actually teach you a lesson. It just makes you toxic. And the thing about toxicity is the only thing required in order to be harmed by toxicity is your proximity to the thing. And like, I am all the way here for boundaries, but I think that boundaries without accountability is just like this kind of elitist showmanship, right? That we're trying to pretend like we're good people, and it's actually just performance art. And like, yes, I get it. We're all thinking of that one person right now, but we're also someone else's one person, right? Like, somebody else hearing this would think of me. I guarantee you, like, if you're listening to this right now, you've ejected someone from your life since the pandemic started. Guarantee it. I have this theory that capitalism has caused some sort of death of emotional resilience. Of course, I'm using the term death, like, and that makes it sound like, of course, using the term death makes it sound like we ever had emotional resilience, which not really. I'm not sure that emotional resilience is really in alignment with our like cultural ethos. But we have been trained to emotionally calcify, like toxic work environments, abusive managers, unreasonable hours, and then we like bring all of that home and we bleed onto our families, our neighbors, our friends, or we just bounce, right? We pick it up and move on, like emotionally or literally, away from the toxicity, the lack of boundaries, all of which I feel works very directly in service of capitalism. Having people who spend decades grinding through an abusive work environment, and having people who will pick up and move at a moment's notice because they might be able to make ends meet 2,000 miles away from where they grew up. Both of these are beneficial to the people that control and benefit materially from our economic system. And it's not everyone, just so that we're clear. Like, not everyone benefits from the way that this is set up right now. The treatment of workers under capitalism, I feel, is very deeply informed by slavery. When you read about the way that enslaved people were treated like machines, entirely disempowered, disenfranchised, not worthy of rest, even, like expected to work the most ridiculous hours, expected to neglect like their very small children, expected to neglect like their elders and disabled people, all to generate capital for the people that owned them. It feels very much in line with the current state of capitalism still. Bosses, management, C-suite all act like this is a framework. Bosses, management, C-suite all act from this framework that says treating actively disempowered employees like machines who are not worthy of actual rest, like 8 hours of sleep or a housing wage, is just good business, right? Because it's good for the shareholders. To say nothing of the treatment of people who are further back in the supply chain, right? Like people who work in industries like meatpacking and manufacturing in the States are victims of literally billions of dollars of wage theft every month. Not to mention abuse and coercion by their employers, because oftentimes they're not documented, so they have no recourse. Individuals in the global south are very frequently paid slave wages to create our stuff. And those people are seen as entirely disposable. Maybe more so than enslaved people, because at least slavers had some sort of incentive to keep alive the humans that were in their legal possession. It seems to me that the more power or patriotism one has, the more likely you are to believe in your own resilience, and actually the less emotional resilience you have when you are engaging with anyone who is different from yourself. But like the powerful patriots, their belief in their own resilience like does not align with the responses that they have when they're confronted with an idea or a person that they don't like. Neither of these groups have much emotional resilience when it comes to people with different values. Like asking these folks to treat anyone different from them like a human being is kind of like asking them if you can pull one of their teeth out with a pair of pliers. Like, they're very disinclined to view immigrants, disabled people, non-white Americans, so many more, as like fully human. And I think that at this point we know capitalism. I think at this point we know the conflict resolution requires mutual respect. Capitalism, as you can probably infer from my previous arguments, doesn't necessarily capitalism, as you can probably infer from my previous arguments, does not precisely encourage mutual respect, right? Conservative thinking generally leads one to believe that respect must inherently go in one direction, and that is up towards the deserving powerful, right? So not Obama, not Biden, but like Trump needs to be respected despite his behavior. Meanwhile, the powerful are under no moral obligation to treat other people like people, never mind treating us with respect. As a matter of policy, like foreign domestic policy, America has never done anything remotely close to conflict resolution. We use all kinds of other stuff like bombs, threats, accidents, lies, manipulation, arrests, seizures, false court. Bombs, threats, accidents, lies, manipulation, intimidation, arrests, seizures, false confessions, all of these things to coerce people without power to capitulate to power, and frankly, to give up their constitutional / human rights. In fact, we are culturally so committed to resolution through violence that like an entire segment of our society believes that prioritizing nonviolent conflict resolution is a sign of weakness. In short, we are currently very fucked. So what do? I think the first thing that we have to do is understand like the immense importance of treating other people like people, right? Like the legacy of slavery is that we found that the dehumanization of workers is just normal and acceptable in our society. And we have to recognize that like we have more power when we work together. Additionally, I think we have to start taking care of ourselves. I know this sounds very like elitist, whatever. I don't mean expensive stuff. I just mean like taking care of your nervous system, like prioritizing sleep if that's something that's possible for you. Meditation, breath work, stretching / yoga, like cold therapy, stuff that is free and or overwhelmingly accessible to everyone. Like we have to prioritize that because when our nervous systems are shot and we're exhausted, we're never going to have the energy to organize, which is literally why they kept enslaved people exhausted and working constantly, was so that they would not have the energy to leave. They would not have the energy to improve their material conditions. Keeping us exhausted means that we're easier to manipulate. We're short with one another. We lack emotional resilience when dealing with other people, when dealing with conflict, when anything comes up, right? I am begging you, like, combat that however that looks like for you, whatever it looks like to take care of your nervous system, like, please do that. Also, finally, pay attention. Like, sorry for being such a nerd. I'm not sorry. I will literally never forget Karis Nemec's quote from the first season of Andor, where he says, surprise from above is never more shocking than surprise from below, right? Like, they need us. We don't need them, right? And that's worth remembering.